figured out, since Brother Taylor isn't here, that I now am officially the oldest speaker on this lectureship this year. And that gives me the right, I guess, to say anything I want, I suppose. I'm not sure about that. What do you think, Glenn? Does it get absolutely all right? Brother Glenn is agreeing with me. Thank you to the elders here, to Darrell and Michael, for the invitation to be with you. I was at your first lectureship. In fact, in those years, Brother Warren and Brother Deaver were here a lot, Brother Michael, and they spoke and so on. Why did that do that? I don't want that up there. But anyway, it's good to be here. Good to see so many here on a Saturday morning. I thought you'd be home watching the ball game. Every time I touch that, that thing moves. I got a phone call from Riley on Monday or Tuesday, I've forgotten what day it was, and he said, "What are the corporal works of mercy?" And I thought, I don't know, let me look it up. There are needs beyond our spiritual needs, and that's the point. Corporal, having to do with the body. This is not the title of Gary Berghoff on MASH. This is about the body and how we take care of those things that have needs in the physical area. I don't know that I've ever called these corporal works before. This comes from Roman Catholicism. It's what they call it in their theological catechisms. But certainly it's a good title, the corporal works of mercy. If you'll open your New Testament to the 25th chapter of Matthew, we will be referring to it quite often as we take a look at the things demanded by the Christ that go beyond the spiritual. I think we base most of our hopes for heaven on our spirituality. What we forget is that's not what he mentioned here on the Judgment Day. He says nothing here in this particular scene about studying the Bible. He says nothing here about attendance, worship, prayer. All very important things, things that people consider when they think about being spiritual. But to Christ, getting beyond that is what's important. And getting beyond that means I'm involved in corporal works of mercy. He didn't ask them how many times they attended worship. In fact, there were two groups in front of him. One of them said, "When did we ever see you in need?" The other group said, "When did we ever see you in need?" He condemned one group, the second one in our text. The first group he commends. What's the difference? They both answered the same way. The difference was that one of those groups never knew what it meant to be hospitable. You remember that one of the qualifications of an elder is to be given to hospitality. That's overlooked too much among us. That's also the qualification of being a Christian. Both of those statements are made about elders and Christians and elders being Christians. What's it mean to be given to hospitality? It means that I'm the kind of person, listen, who's out in the community already, before I ever become an elder, looking for people who have physical needs. I'm given to it. Every time I see a physical need, I want to do it. I want to help that person. I'm driven by it. When you put up that sign out here that said the Church of Christ meets here, what you were saying biblically is we are now responsible for the needs of this community. We're here to serve. We're here to feed the hungry and take care of the sick and visit those who are in prison and clothe the naked. We're here because we're involved in the corporal works of mercy. The pattern is our master, of course. He always is the pattern for whatever we do. He called us to do this. When he looked at us, he saw a sheep without a shepherd. When he looked at us, he saw lost sheep and lost coins and prodigal sons. When he looked at us, he saw a lost people, desperate for something. I believe that people walk around in this life not knowing why they are miserable. And they're miserable because he's missing in their lives. He's not there. I don't have time to tell you today about my background, but because of Dorothy, my whole life is different. Why? Jesus is in it. I was saying to my daughter-in-law one day about how many mistakes I've made in my lifetime. She said, "You didn't make one." I said, "What's that?" She said, "You brought Jesus into the family." He's the pattern. He is the one who is sympathetic to our problems and empathetic. He can feel our needs. He knows when we're hungry. He knows when we're desperate. He knows when we're dark and lonely. Brother Riley already quoted Galatians 6:10, but look at it again. As we therefore have what? Opportunity. Let us, that's the church, do good to all men. That includes non-Christians and Christians. The church is commanded to take care of the needs. This is not a suggestion. This is a command of all men whenever the opportunity is presented to us. The forbidding brothers always tell us that the only persons that the church treasurer can help are Christians. They are called the saints only, forbidding brothers. But 2 Corinthians 9:13 is a repeat of Galatians 6:10. We have to take care of the needs of all men. I'm told, well, the word man isn't in the text. Yes, it is. The word man is in the text. When you have an adjective in the Greek and it's masculine, you can read it, all men. It's legitimate. It's a legitimate translation. We can take care of the needs of all men. That would include all of mankind, men and women. Who's the pattern? Jesus. You want to be like Jesus? He said, if you salute your brothers only, what do you more than others? I came home the other day and my neighbor, who has a zero-turn John Deere grass mower, was out in my yard helping mow my yard. I've got 6 acres to mow. I was so happy about that. I went out and bought one of those myself so I could do the same thing. But now I noticed he doesn't come over and help me anymore. I shouldn't help myself so much. But here he was, non-Christian, helping me. Well, that kind of put me to shame. I didn't go over and help him mow his grass. I'll have to do that. Hope I mow it right for him. He's kind of particular about the way he mows. Isn't that something? Here's a non-Christian helping me. I wasn't over there helping him. Makes me feel bad. People talk about these people who knock on our doors all the time. But do you know at least they're knocking on a door? We're not out there doing it. I need to remember what he was like. I'm talking about Jesus. He was sympathetic and empathetic to our needs. I have been asked sometimes about this 25th chapter of Matthew. Look at the question I put up there. Is this just some kind of old Bible list? I mean, who would let someone go naked or thirsty today? Who would do that? But there are 2 dimensions to this thought. One is practical, the other is personal. Christ is the Lord of everything, creation, including me, my marriage, family, church, jobs, social, economic, political. I have to be involved in all of it to be like him. Isn't that interesting? Did you do that? This is a wonderful computer. Now it's gone. What happened? Here we're back again. Did you do that? Oh, Wyatt did it. Okay. What was I talking about and why? Every area of life has my involvement if I'm a Christian. I am duty-bound to stand against social evils, according to what I'm being taught here in Matthew 25. Any human being who's being degraded, I need to be his defender. I need to come to the defense of those who are downtrodden, spoken against, hated because of their race, creed, or color. I need to be against that kind of thing. I am a person who is taking care of the physical needs of people. I'm a Christian. It's not just an old list. While you're there in Matthew 25, look at the first part of that scene there. Jesus paints 3 scenes for us. Listen carefully now. Every one of these scenes involves Christians. It doesn't involve Christians and non-Christians here. Chapter 25 isn't about Christians and non-Christians. It's about Christians. And he divides these Christians into 2 groups in the first scene, 3 groups in the second scene, and 2 groups in the last scene. He says in that first scene, there were some who had lamps. They were wise virgins. And they filled their lamps, all 5 of them did. The other 5 were unwise virgins. They were not involved as Christians should be involved. They had not filled their lamps with the work of God. They weren't ready for his coming. They'd been living their lives for themselves. And so when he came, they weren't ready. They ran to the other 5 and said, "Give us your oil. I can't trade my work with you. It's my work. I can't share it. It's my responsibility. I can't give you some of the oil in my lamp. It's up to me. I can't say, well, the preacher has to do it, or the elders have to do it, or somebody else should do it, or the church had to do it." How many times have I heard that expression? I wish the church would, wait a minute, I'm the church. In the second scene, he says, the kingdom of heaven, verse 15, is like unto a man traveling into a far country. Called unto him his servants, divided unto them his goods. Whatever he gave these people belonged to him. He gave one fellow 5 pieces of money, called talents in the King James. He gave to another man 2 pieces of money. He gave to a third man 1 piece of money. How did he decide how to give that? Your Bible says, my Bible says, every man was given according to his several ability. Jesus gave each man what he knew he could do. When the Lord said we can feed the hungry and the sick, take care of the sick and so on, he knew we could do it. He didn't give us an impossible task. He gave each one of those men a task that they could do. When he came back to get his goods, one of those fellows had taken it and buried it in the backyard. Why? He was afraid. He was afraid to do what the Lord told him to do. Some people teach this and say, well, the Lord gives us our talents. No, we build our own talents. That comes from our abilities. And the Lord never gives us anything we can't do. And since the Lord told us to do these things, he knows the church can do them, or he wouldn't tell us to do it. He knows the church can do it. You dig down deep enough, you can help somebody that's hungry. You dig down deep enough, you can help somebody that's sick. We're duty bound by Christ. And in that last scene, and I'll save that for a moment, there are 2 groups. All Christians. Some are sheep, some are goats. He's dividing the church there, not the world from the church, the church. And that group that were called goats were shocked. When did we ever see you hungry? They never saw a hungry person in their lives. Every time they sat down to Thanksgiving dinner, they never thought about it. Nobody was hungry in his house, so he didn't worry about it. Racism, tyranny, violations of human rights. When was the last time you heard a sermon about abortion? We just had a president leave office who said during his presidency that people who are 75 years old should get out of the way. Glenn, that's the first step to euthanasia. Euthanasia is not about young people in China. That's about putting to death old folks who are in the way. I'm against that. I hope you are. I will speak against that, right against that. They are all evils incompatible with being a child of God. Whatsoever you would that men should do unto you. And don't buy these modern versions that say, whatever you would that men would do unto you. That's not the golden rule. That's the golden plated rule. The golden rule says, whatsoever you would that men should do unto you. Doesn't matter how he treats me. It's up to me to treat him right. It's what he should do, not what he would do, because I have two different rules there. Hold that thing about the sheep and the goats for a moment. Donations to a food bank, volunteering at a soup kitchen, taking food to a neighbor, all are corporal works. You know how many people go to bed hungry in this world today? I stood in the rotunda in front of the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, preaching on television. Thousands of people walking around, not even listening, until I said in the sermon, 40 million of your children do not know who God is. And some of them stopped and turned around and looked. Not only do 40 million of their children not know who God is, some of these families don't take care of their children anymore. They don't feed them correctly, they don't clothe them correctly, they don't educate them correctly. We have multitudes of people in this country who have children who go to bed hungry. In the United States of America today, 37% of children live in a one-parent home where she or he is never present very often. They're not being taken care of. Look at James 1:27 for me again. Now, I know Riley preached all these sermons for us, but I'm going to go over this one again. I want you to see a word here. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless. That's not just folks who don't have parents. That means folks who don't have spiritual guides. We have VBS at Forest Hill, and lots of children come one Sunday a year. What about the other 51 Sundays? They're still fatherless. That is, they go to a home where neither mom or dad are Christians. They're orphans in God's eyes. They don't have a spiritual guide there. There are thousands of children like this out there. This congregation right here, probably if you went around this community, knocked on the doors and asked them if they went to the service, probably told no, because 65% of the American public no longer darkens a church door of any kind. So you've got multitudes of children out here who are fatherless. They don't have a spiritual guide. They have a problem. They're hungry in a lot of ways and thirsty in other ways. I've learned that when I vote, I want somebody in office who can help this homeless problem. We have all kinds of arguments about how to provide jobs for folks, but I think we need to be understanding something. If I'm a Christian employer, I'm going to try to put as many people to work as I can. Look at Mark 14:7, and look at what he said there. Our Lord was homeless. He told a man on one occasion, the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. Matthew 8:20. We are a people that aren't very concerned about the homeless. We brought him to services very many Sundays over a 2-year period. He never smelled very well because he didn't have a place to live. Bought him a little air conditioner unit. He was living in 100-degree heat half the time. Did some other things for him, clothes. But I remember what the brethren said when we'd sit down in the pew. Why are you bringing that man in here? He smells bad. Al's dead now. Yes, he didn't smell very well. But he needed some help. He needed some help, folks. I remember Brother Wayne Coates telling me one time, he said, we were told to go out and get the lame and the blind And those are the folks we really don't want. We're to clothe the naked. How many of you have seen a benevolent room with clothes in it you wouldn't wear? Why would you think anyone else would want them? Why would you think that I can just give any old thing and that will serve the whole problem, take care of the whole problem? It doesn't. If I'm going to give to that kind of a thing, why don't I give the best? Give the church a good name instead of a bad one. Glenn, there are folks in this community who are hungry physically. And sometimes when you feed them, you can reach them spiritually too, and Larry will talk to us about that in a moment. I want to go back to Matthew 25 now. Look at verse 31 with me. I want us to see the big difference between being more faithful as a Christian and missing the point altogether. He's coming in his glory. He's sitting on his throne. All the nations, go teach all nations. These are members of the church from everywhere. He divided them. He had to divide them. If this were the world and the church, he wouldn't have to divide them. As a shepherd divided his sheep from the goats, sets the sheep on the right, the goats on the left from his perspective. He said to the group on the right, I was hungry. Watch these words. You gave me food. Charge them for it. Didn't have a sale. He gave them food. I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. I was a stranger. You took me into your home. You ever done that? She knocked on our door one day, 14 years old, crying, bawling really, crying out loud. What's wrong? My parents kicked me out. I'm expecting. We took her in that Wednesday night. It was a Wednesday. We took her in, took her to services. All she had was the clothes she brought with her, which were very scanty. And one good sister told her she wasn't dressed very well to come to services. I was a stranger. You took me in. Took us a long time to convert that young lady after that statement was made to her. Naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. We were in the ICU unit, Glenn. This young student was with me. This fellow in there was hooked up to an oscilloscope. You know that thing is going, incidentally, that's a good sermon. This is life. This is not life. This is death. Life is like not like this. It's like this. Anyways, he's hooked up to an oscilloscope. He's got all those little things on him with all those electrical wires on him. So they had an EKG machine hooked to him too. He's got a mask on to help him breathe. He had a tube in his side because his lung had collapsed, and he had one somewhere else for other purposes. So this guy is hooked up to 2 tubes, a bunch of wires, a mask, and an oscilloscope. And we visited him for a few minutes, had a prayer. He nodded. Yes, he wanted prayer. Anyways, on the way out, this young student said, now, if you need anything, give us a call. Don't fail to call if you need anything. I thought, that's not going to work. So we got into the car and I started. He said, we're not headed back for the school. I said, no, we're going to his house. Why are we going to his house? I said, you'll see. We got there and his wife was sleeping because she'd been up all night for several nights. She was getting some rest. Her daughter was there and I said, does she need any groceries? Yeah. I said, well, I'll go get those. Give me the list. I said, you get his lawnmower. He said, why? I said, you can mow his grass. His grass needs mowing. So when I got back, I said to her, now, if you need anything else, call him. And he said to me in the car, I get the point. What good does it do if you just pray for them? Be ye warmed and filled. Isn't that going to work? Church, you want to do some great good when they're in the hospital, go mow their grass. Go get their groceries. You young people, strong, healthy, not like me, old and crippled, you can mow the grass too. Take care of the dog and the cat. Run errands. And the church will grow, folks. It will grow. Can't help it. Sometime tomorrow morning, you will make an announcement about who's sick. Why? I want to know why you're making that announcement. I've watched it for 53 years. And it's the same thing. So-and-so is sick. Okay. Who's going to do anything about it? And sometimes if we don't make that announcement, you know what happens? The person who isn't announced gets angry. You didn't tell that I was sick. Well, we didn't know it. You didn't let us know. Maybe, or some other excuse. Why did we make the announcement? And when was the last time you heard an announcement like this? So-and-so is hungry. Let's take him some food. So-and-so is in prison. Let's visit. Or is that too embarrassing? I challenge everybody who can hear me today to be more faithful in the corporal works of mercy. We have to understand He put those ahead of the spiritual, because He knew that the hardest thing to get people to do was not attend services. The hardest thing was to get them out into the community, helping those who had needs, looking for those who had needs, given to hospitality. That's how you're more faithful in corporal works of mercy. Thank you for your kind attention.